Feeling puffy and low on energy, but your doctor hasn't found a smoking gun. Before you assume it's just your thyroid or a slow metabolism, take a look at your plate. The kidneys can accumulate stress quietly, no sharp pain, no dramatic symptoms, and over time a set of everyday healthy choices can add up to dose-dependent damage that shows up as fluid retention, fatigue, and lab abnormalities. Think of the kidneys as a pair of delicate filters and pipes. They handle huge volumes of blood every minute, and they rely on balanced minerals, clean blood flow, and unbroken tubules to do their job. When diet repeatedly introduces crystalline particles, oxidized molecules, excess electrolytes, or highly absorbable additives, those filters work harder and may slowly scar. I'm going to walk you through 8 foods and food categories that are often labeled or perceived as healthy, but that, in certain forms or amounts and especially in people with dehydration, poor gut microbiota, low mineral reserves, or existing metabolic or kidney issues, may be increasing the burden on the kidneys. For each one I'll explain, in plain terms, how it may stress the kidneys, who's most at risk, and one practical micro-step you might consider. These aren't categorical condemnations. They may contribute in context, and risk is dose and person dependent. But given how common some of these habits are, it's worth knowing what to watch for. First, processed and high-sodium convenience foods. They often sound healthy when marketed as low-fat, high-protein, or fortified. The problem isn't the protein alone, it's the sodium without adequate potassium and fluid balance. High sodium promotes fluid retention and higher blood pressure, which increases pressure inside tiny kidney vessels and forces the filters to work harder. In people who drink less water, take certain medications that alter fluid balance, or already have high blood pressure, this extra salt load can translate into more swelling and persistent tiredness. What you may consider: prioritize whole food versions of convenience items. Check sodium per serving on the label and aim for potassium-rich foods alongside salty meals, unless your clinician has advised otherwise. Second, non-dairy coffee creamers and many flavored creamers. They're convenient and often marketed as dairy-free or plant-based, but many contain emulsifiers, thickening agents, and additives that weren't part of traditional diets. Some emulsifiers and industrial additives may influence membrane integrity in the gut and have been associated in experimental studies with low-level inflammation or changes in how the body handles proteins. In the kidney, any factor that nudges proteins to leak across membranes or that increases inflammatory signaling can make the filter more porous over time. People who rely on multiple servings daily, coffee after coffee, and those with pre-existing proteinuria or autoimmune tendencies may be more vulnerable. What you may consider: rotate to simpler creamers with short ingredient lists, or use small amounts of real milk or milk alternatives without long additive lists, and read labels for unfamiliar additives. Third, alcoholic drinks and mixed sugary cocktails. Many people think of alcohol as separate from diet, but mixed drinks that combine alcohol with sugary mixers bring 2 kidney-relevant problems: dehydration and fructose. Alcohol itself can promote fluid loss and electrolyte shifts that reduce kidney perfusion temporarily. Add in high fructose mixers, sodas, sweetened juices, syrups, and you introduce rapid fructose metabolism that can raise uric acid. Elevated uric acid is associated with crystal formation, inflammation, and reduced kidney blood flow in some people. Those at higher risk include people who drink frequently, those who don't hydrate well, and anyone with gout, metabolic syndrome, or prior kidney stones. What you may consider: limit sugary mixers, alternate alcoholic drinks with water, and be mindful of frequency rather than demonizing an occasional drink. Fourth, green smoothies loaded with high oxalate greens and plant ingredients. Smoothies can feel virtuous, but blending concentrates compounds. Spinach, beet greens, almonds, and certain seeds are naturally high in oxalate. Oxalates can bind calcium and, in susceptible people or when hydration is low, form microscopic crystals that can irritate kidney tubules or seed stones. The microbiome also matters. Oxalobacter formigenes is a gut bacterium that helps break down oxalate. Low levels of it, after antibiotics or with dysbiosis, can increase oxalate absorption. People who consume very large daily smoothie volumes, those with previous kidney stones, or those with low calcium magnesium citrate intake are more likely to feel an effect. What you may consider: diversify your greens. Mix lower oxalate options like kale, romaine, or arugula. Pair oxalate-rich meals with a calcium source at the meal to help bind oxalate in the gut, and avoid making smoothies your sole source of produce every day. Fifth, artificial sweeteners and diet products. Low-calorie sweeteners are widely used in sodas and packaged goods, and they're often framed as a healthier swap for sugar. However, research published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology suggests that long-term consumption of artificially sweetened beverages, specifically 2 or more per day, is associated with a doubling in the risk for kidney function decline. Furthermore, experimental models from researchers at institutions like Harvard Medical School indicate that certain sweeteners can alter gut microbes, producing metabolites that directly stress cellular energy pathways in the kidney's tubular cells. While correlation doesn't always equal causation, the consistent link in large-scale observational studies is a signal that high-frequency use may not be the free pass we once thought. What you may consider: limit habitual, high-frequency use, rotate choices, and focus on reducing overall sweetness preference over time, rather than simply replacing sugar with concentrated artificial sweeteners. Sixth, processed meats and foods high in inorganic phosphate additives. Deli meats, many packaged sausages, some cheeses, and prepared frozen meals often contain phosphate additives used for texture and shelf life. Inorganic phosphate is absorbed more readily than phosphate bound in whole foods, so frequent intake can raise serum phosphate in susceptible people and is associated with vascular calcification and tissue stiffness in chronic kidney disease populations. Excess phosphate can also be a renal stressor because the kidneys are the main route for excreting extra phosphate. Those at higher risk include people with reduced kidney function, older adults, and those who consume a lot of ultra-processed foods. What you may consider: scan ingredient lists for words like phosphate or phosphoric, and favor fresh meats and minimally processed options where possible. Seventh, seed and highly processed vegetable oils. Corn, soybean, canola, and some vegetable oil blends are often industrially processed at high heat, which can produce oxidized lipids and reactive aldehydes. These oxidation products, when consumed frequently in large amounts, are associated in lab studies with inflammation and with damage to the glomeruli and tubular cells in animal models. The picture in humans is complex, but in practical terms, frequent consumption of deep-fried, highly processed oil products can increase oxidative burden. People who eat lots of fried or pre-packaged foods, or who heat oils repeatedly during cooking, may be more exposed. What you may consider: rotate fats toward stable options for high-heat cooking, e.g., certain saturated or monounsaturated oils designed for heat. Reduce intake of deep-fried foods and emphasize whole food fat sources like nuts, olives, and fatty fish in moderation. Eighth, added sugars and high fructose sweeteners, including high fructose corn syrup and high-usage agave. Sugar in excess isn't just a calorie problem. Fructose in particular is metabolized in a way that can deplete cellular ATP in the liver quickly and generate uric acid as a byproduct. Uric acid can crystallize and irritate the urinary tract and kidney structures, and it's also linked with systemic inflammation and higher blood pressure in some studies. Over time, high dietary fructose intake is associated with metabolic changes that increase kidney workload. Those at higher risk include people with high intake of sugary beverages, those with insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome, and people prone to gout or kidney stones. What you may consider: prioritize water or unsweetened beverages, reserve sweetened drinks for occasional enjoyment, and check labels for hidden sources of added sugars in packaged foods. Let's pause and connect a few dots. These items may look different on the surface: a smoothie, a creamer, a processed slice of turkey. But they converge on a few common kidney stressors: crystalline burden, oxalate, uric acid, oxidative and aldehyde stress from damaged fats, electrolyte imbalance, sodium versus potassium, and an increased load of readily absorbed inorganic minerals like phosphate. Any one of these can raise the work the kidneys must do. Together, and when combined with low fluid intake, reduced gut breakdown of harmful compounds, or pre-existing disease, they can produce slow, cumulative harm. That's why an otherwise healthy-looking habit repeated day after day can be riskier than an indulgence now and then. Two of the most common and impactful drivers in this list are worth emphasizing. First, fructose and added sugars, found in sodas, sweetened coffees, many healthy bottled beverages, and processed snacks, are particularly efficient at raising uric acid and promoting low-grade inflammation. Repeated exposure nudges metabolic systems toward higher blood pressure and kidney stress. Second, oxidized seed oils and repeatedly heated industrial fats produce reactive aldehydes and lipid oxidation products that, in experimental settings, can damage glomerular and tubular structures. When both patterns appear together, High sugar intake and frequent fried processed oil consumption, they can amplify metabolic stress and inflammation in ways that are plausibly harmful for long-term kidney health. That doesn't mean a single treat will cause permanent damage, but frequent co-occurrence raises cumulative risk. You should also keep in mind several contextual moderators that change how these foods affect any individual. Hydration is simple but powerful. Adequate fluid dilutes urine, reduces crystal formation, and helps the kidneys clear waste. Gut transit and microbiome composition, for example the presence of Oxalobacter formigenes, influence how much oxalate is absorbed from plant foods. Antibiotics, low-fiber diets, or chronic constipation can increase oxalate uptake. Mineral status matters too. Dietary calcium and magnesium can bind oxalate in the gut and reduce absorption, while citrate helps keep urine less prone to crystallization. Medications and medical conditions change the equation. Certain blood pressure drugs, diuretics, or metabolic disorders alter electrolyte handling and therefore a food's impact. In short, context is king. The same food can be harmless for one person and problematic for another. So what are realistic, evidence-minded steps you can take without overhauling your life or chasing unproven detox fixes? First, don't demonize whole categories. Instead, focus on form, frequency, and balance. If you love green smoothies, rotate lower oxalate greens, add a calcium-containing food to the same meal, and don't make extraordinarily large daily portions your only vegetable source. If you drink coffee with creamer multiple times a day, check ingredient lists for long additive chains and try simplifying what you add. For drinks, prefer plain water most of the time and reserve sweetened or alcoholic beverages for occasional enjoyment. Reduce intake of ultra-processed foods to lower your exposure to phosphate additives and hidden sodium. In cooking, avoid repeatedly heating the same oil or frying at very high temperatures frequently. When possible, choose stable fats for high-heat cooking and whole food fat sources for daily use. If you're already noticing persistent swelling, unexplained low energy, changes in urination, or a history of kidney stones or gout, those are signals to talk with a clinician. Your provider can evaluate renal function with blood and urine tests, review medications that may interact with diet effects, and recommend individualized adjustments. Don't stop prescribed medicines or start supplements without guidance, but do bring up any dietary patterns you suspect are linked to symptoms. Small, personalized changes often have disproportionate benefits. To summarize, 8. Healthy, appearing foods or categories: processed high-sodium convenience items, non-dairy and flavored creamers, alcoholic and mixed sugary drinks, concentrated oxalate green smoothies, artificial sweeteners in diet products, processed meats and phosphate additives, oxidized seed and vegetable oils, and frequent added sugars. High fructose sweeteners can, in specific forms and frequencies and particularly in vulnerable people, increase kidney workload through crystals, oxidants, mineral overload, and electrolyte imbalance. The risk is cumulative and context-dependent, not universal. Practical moves: hydrate, diversify greens, read labels for sodium and phosphate additives, limit repeated use of processed oils, and reduce habitual high-frequency intake of concentrated sweeteners or artificial sweeteners. Can lower the day-to-day burden on your filters. If this conversation resonated and you want clear, practical breakdowns like this on food and organ health, subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. And finally, if you have persistent swelling, ongoing unexplained fatigue, a history of kidney stones, gout, or known kidney disease, please consult a healthcare professional for personalized evaluation and testing rather than relying solely on online guidance. Small, informed changes can protect kidney function over the long run. And catching issues early is the best way to preserve energy and reduce swelling before problems become harder to reverse.